My Little Pony, fascism is magic? That's what media outlets were saying about certain members of the Brony community after it was revealed that the subculture had many fans of the far right. Caitlin Tiffany of The Atlantic described this phenomenon back in 2020, where she noted that the fandom is mostly comprised of white men, a few of which have extremist sympathies. Tiffany detailed what she described as a civil war breaking out between the Bronies during 2020, as obviously this was a time in the US of civil unrest on the back of George Floyd's death. The article goes on to say that on a website named Derpyburu, there are hundreds upon hundreds of pieces of racist fan art. In fact, back then, the term racist was a searchable category that yielded 900 results. According to Tiffany, while everything on Derpyburu might seem slightly strange but not awful at first, when you take a closer look, this pony paradise is tainted with horrible, brutal, violent, and distasteful art. Tiffany wrote that an image that she recently viewed on the site depicted a My Little Pony character presiding over 3 lynchings and 1 beheading of cartoons drawn to represent various marginalized groups. Now, of course, it would be completely ludicrous to say that the entire fanbase is filled with these sorts of people. The article admits that in the wake of the BLM movement in the USA, many people were making My Little Pony art to support the cause. Much of this artwork, though, was bombarded with downvotes in what was thought to be a coordinated movement. This could just mean that the community members that were voting it down were against the BLM movement, as after all it did have its critics, not all of them Nazis. But apparently, this sparked a significant conversation about racism in the fandom for the first time. As a result of this, the mods got more active in deleting posts that were deemed as trying to incite controversy, and also deleted many posts critical of the BLM movement. This was a balancing act though, because the owners didn't want too much censorship on the site as to seem authoritarian. And that's when a new character entered the fray. This is Ariane, an MLP character that has been described as the ponification of Nazism. According to Tiffany, there were some bronies who both supported the BLM movement, but also liked Ariane, and somehow couldn't see a contradiction in that. It should be noted that Ariane had apparently been around since 2014, but it was only now that news outlets had noticed her problematic presence. The Atlantic article goes on to make a few more claims, but in response, many MLP fans were upset that they were painted in this light. Ironic considering that the main voice actor is Jewish. To call MLP a breeding ground for supremacists is absolutely laughable. 900 images tagged as racist, millions of images not tagged as racist, less than 0.05%. This article is entirely manufactured outrage. Whether or not this was a legitimate problem within the fan base, or whether it was just the media trying to create a boogeyman out of nothing, I'll leave that up to you, but that is just one of the many stories we have to talk about today concerning the Brony fandom, as we dive deep into some of the most strange, peculiar, and unnerving stories that it has to offer. Now, this is a very popular topic to discuss on YouTube, with the likes of Raymundo, Turkey Tom, and Izzy's all covering the topic before me, so I want to try and talk about some stories that they might not have covered. Hopefully, you can learn some fresh stories that you haven't heard before. But before we get into discussing the hidden controversies of the Brony community, we first have to understand what they are. So the term Brony is commonly given to an adult man who is a fan of the My Little Pony franchise. The fandom is said to have originated on 4chan more than a decade ago. To most of the web, this subculture was strange because My Little Pony is clearly not marketed towards adult men. The franchise originated in the 1980s, marketed towards young girls, but come the 2010s and a lot of male viewers seem to gravitate towards the show. People that previously you probably wouldn't have expected. Back in 2012, Dr. Patrick Edwards and Dr. Marshall Redden conducted a survey that took notes for 20,000 bronies and came up with these 5 categories that they can all be classified as. First up, you have the social brony. These are people who have come out, for lack of better words, as a brony. They're open and upfront about it with people in their lives. This makes up about 29% of the group. Then you have the secret brony, the opposite of social. At 28%, these guys don't disclose that they're bronies publicly, though they do engage in fan behaviour, and they are the joint second largest group. Then at 8%, you have the hidden Brony, who neither reveal their love for the franchise publicly or engage in fan behaviour. Up next, you have the independent Brony, who also don't engage in fan behaviour, but I'm led to believe that these guys do it out of apathy rather than shame, as they seem to be more mild fans of the property. And finally, you have the mixed Brony, who exhibits traits from more than one of these groups. This classification makes up about 28% too, but it should be noted that because this study is more than a decade old, modern Brony statistics might look a little bit different. Before we continue though, I have to clarify that when making a video on a group such as this, generalizations have to be made. It's a very large online subculture at the end of the day. This behavior, is it strange? Sure. Is it inherently wrong though? Not exactly, at least not watching a kid's show, surely that's not wrong. But it's when you create a culture and a community around it where problems arise. In this video, we'll be discussing the worst that the fandom has to offer, and I'm sure there'll be some bronies out there that can agree that there are some miscreants among the rest, including many of the more vocal members who would not only give the fandom a bad name, but would also corrupt it for bronies and the target demographic of young girls alike. And so next, I have a story about just that. This is a story that concerns a Tumblr user who 9 years ago expressed her anger and disgust of the Brony community after she came across someone at the 2014 Bay Area Pony Spectacular Convention, or BabsCon, that appeared to be the target of a predator. According to a Daily Dot article that summarised the story, it involves an 11-year-old girl who is attending the event with 3 members of her family. However, this story begins with the girl in distress running up to the SAC anime table, asking if she could hide. The people at this table were representing an anime-themed convention based in Sacramento, as the SAC anime name would suggest. One of these workers, named Callie, recalled the events on her Tumblr account, stating, "We met a little girl who was there with her family. She got a button drawn at our booth, told us all about her favourite ponies, and was overall just too damn cute. She had an MLP lanyard filled with pins that she had gotten in the vendor's room and gave me a Fluttershy pin because she liked my cosplay. She ended up just hanging out with us for a while and being super cute. We called her Babby because she's 11 and precious. The next day, she runs up to our booth terrified and asks if she can please hide under our table for a few minutes. Turns out, a dude had been following her around the con all day and tried to get her to come up to his hotel room alone. She tells us she thought it was okay at first because he was wearing a My Little Pony shirt, but she didn't want to go anywhere with him and he made her uneasy. At one point, after she had refused, he grabbed her arm in the elevators and tried to get her to follow him. She ran, and now she wants somewhere to hide. We tell her, of course, hurry her behind our booth and fucking station ourselves around her because she is 11 years old and all of us are prepared to physically attack the human trash heap that tries to fuck with her. We're all dressed up in wigs and ears and we're 100,000% prepared to rip them off and launch across that table to defend this kid. Eventually, this very large dude strolls by, very obviously looking around, and she quietly points him out to us. At this point, I'm ready to set him on fire, but when I ask her if she needs me to go report him, she shakes her head. She doesn't want to get in trouble or make anyone mad. We see him a few more times over the course of the day because he keeps meandering over to our booth and just casually looking around. Eventually, he actually stops to take a flyer from our table and asks us a question, and we coldly send him on his way. We start sending a co-worker with Babby whenever her parents aren't around, and she wants to go check out Artists Valley or the Vendors Hall, because otherwise, she's not safe. Obviously a terrifying situation, but also a somewhat strange one at that, because many people who read this post pointed out some curious flaws in the narrative. That mostly being that if these staff members knew that this young girl was being pursued, hearing the statements that she gave, for them not to have informed the authorities would have been incredibly negligible, it would have been dangerous, it would have been beyond short-sighted. From their perspective, there is an active predator on the hunt in front of their own eyes who has been picked out by the supposed victim. How could you not have removed him from the event and tried to get him locked up? On top of this, much of the rest of the post was critical of the Brony community, with the original poster writing, "My point here, this is why I fucking hate Bronies. because grown-ass men are flooding into a space carved out for children, often little girls, and are making it unsafe for them. The poster went on to compare the situation to something like a bunch of gross neckbeards swarming Disneyland and shoving kids out of the way so they can grope Cinderella and finding nothing wrong with it because they think they're entitled to it. But because of the inaction of the people involved and the clear anti-Brony sentiment, many people actually thought that Callie was lying. They thought that this entire situation was made up just to demonize Bronies. So we have the million-dollar question, was that true? Well, if we look a little bit deeper, the same story was corroborated by another SAC anime staffer, which would suggest that it was legitimate. But at the same time, a woman named Olivia Daniels, the vice chair and head of events for BabsCon, claimed that the convention safety team was never notified of this. She went on to defend the Brony community, saying that the issue was not about some innate evil of Bronies, but about the potential dangers that come with hosting any large event, especially one that involves children. The Daily Dot then wrote that Callie's account was later deleted, likely in backlash from A, the people that thought that she was just using this as an excuse to attack Bronies, and B, the people that had reservations with how this situation was dealt with. Though when I checked the link that the article provided, the account was still up and active. But anyways, you might be surprised to find out that this story does indeed have a conclusion, as a short while after this incident became public knowledge, the girl's mother came out with a Tumblr post to clear everything up. Was this story true, or was it false? Well, it was a bit of both. I'm sure by now you're screaming at your phone or laptop, where was the family in all this? I mentioned them at the start, but I didn't discuss where they were during this alleged harassment. So this family is comprised of the mother, her adult daughter, her grandson, and her minor daughter. A bit complicated, but if I'm not mistaken, this woman's grandson is older than her daughter. I think that the grandson is the son of the adult daughter, and then there's just a huge age gap between the adult and minor daughter. I might be mistaken, but that is my understanding. Now, the mother and adult daughter apparently have some sort of disability, which was why they struggled to keep up with the grandson, who was almost 16, and the 11-year-old daughter. At a point in time, none of the three were near the daughter, which was when she got approached by the man. So it seems to be true that he did in fact ask her to go back to his hotel room to apparently help him pack. What was not true though was the claim that he grabbed her arm while in the elevator. According to the mother, this part of the story was heavily exaggerated. There was never any physical contact made, nor were the two ever alone together at the same time. They happened to share an elevator ride, but never interacted. The mum confirmed that the elevator was filled with people, and the two were standing away from each other. The mother also claims that at the time she didn't know anything about this either, and that she would have contacted security had she been aware. Nonetheless, what was done, and she apologised for the original poster's anti-Brony rant. Obviously, the protection of children is at the forefront for every parent who has a kid who enjoys the My Little Pony franchise. Critics of Bronies will say that it's a bit of a safety concern to have a bunch of grown adults and children highly interested in the same franchise. And in September 2023, this safety concern would once again make headlines after a My Little Pony branded children's snack would open up a terrifying rabbit hole. If I'm not mistaken, this story is a first on YouTube. It hasn't been covered before, so allow me to invite you into this shocking and sickening tale. This story is set in Hull, England, a place that I've only discussed once prior on this channel for its infamous Krispy Kreme Club incident. My apologies in advance to anyone who lives there, but it's a pretty unremarkable place in England, with one Guardian article saying that the number 1 and 2 reasons why you should visit it is that it has white telephone boxes and not many green cars. But last month, a pretty crazy story came out of the city, and that was that a mother was doing her grocery shop when she found something very strange on the back of one of the items that she had bought. The item in question was a My Little Pony mini biscotti packet of cookies. These are the sorts of things perfect for a snack in the lunchboxes. Cheap, small portions but still delicious, and obviously it's marketed towards children. What could go wrong? Well, the answer might shock you. The unnamed Yorkshire mother of 3 discovered a web link on the back of the cookies, which when typed onto the computer, led her to a website full of CP. And of course by that I mean Chinese pornography. Obviously incredibly inappropriate for anyone who might be the target demographic of this sweet treat. The mother made the point that if any child would have taken this product, seen the link on the back and then typed it into the computer, maybe thinking that it would lead them to a My Little Pony website, it would have completely shattered their innocence. She sounded the alarm for local parents and also informed the shop where she bought them from, Heron Foods. For those of you who don't know, Heron Foods is a discount grocery chain predominantly located in the north of England. Heron Foods naturally ordered a product recall on the cookies, with a spokesperson coming out to say, "We've been working with the supplier to ensure this product is recalled across all our stores nationwide. Customers should return the products to their nearest Heron Foods store for a full refund." Interestingly enough though, in the backlash, it was revealed that yet another supermarket chain popular in the UK, Lidl, had been selling the same product but in a Paw Patrol theme just a month prior. But upon noticing the link, Lidl quickly had the mini cookies removed from their shelves. There was criticism thrown at Heron Foods by local parents who admitted that they should have acted earlier. Of course, there were many questions asked in the fallout of this. Who was behind it? What were their intentions? When did this start? Where were they located? Why were they doing it? And how were they getting away with it? So as it turns out, the news article that I found which reported on this stated that public records show that the URL domain on the packaging is currently registered to a person in Lianyonggang, China. Previously, it belonged to the manufacturer of the My Little Pony products, a sub-brand of Appy Food and Drinks named Appy Kids Co. Listings of the company house website showed that Appy Food and Drinks was dissolved in June 2022. Lidl's recall notice referred to the URL being compromised. Therefore, we can assume that this was likely a rogue individual, or at least, we hope he's rogue. We can also assume that this had been going on for upwards of a year, and this mysterious Chinese person probably took some sort of sick pleasure in doing it, as it was a laid out plan, intentional from the start. It goes without saying that many bronies might see themselves as outcasts. Many in the past have been mocked or ridiculed for their love of the franchise. But what happens when it all gets a bit too much? What happens when the bronies fight back? We're going back in time more than 11 years for this next tale, back to August of 2012, with this story being set at a convention called Everfree Northwest. As you might expect, this was an MLP convention which was being held in Seattle, Washington. To this very day, you can still find footage from the event up on YouTube. These dusty relics are almost fossils now, giving us in the modern day the clues to what this event must have been like. By all accounts, this was not one of the more traumatic MLP conventions, but the day after it wrapped, a blog post was put up on Tumblr by a user of the name Sporkbot. This post would send shockwaves throughout the MLP community, as it detailed how one person in attendance resorted to physical violence after they thought the franchise was being mocked. The post, titled Love and Tolerance, reads, "We were there as fans of MLP FIM who were not actively involved in an online fandom and representing the con that we help run. Everfree Northwest had set up a table at our show, so we were setting up at theirs. We had a great time tabling and did meet a lot of really nice people. We also met some people who were not so nice. I was sitting at our table in the main hallway of Everfree Northwest, just outside the doors for the livestream room, eating dinner with my girlfriend. I got up to use the bathroom and saw some people peeking into the panel room to see what was going on. They were wearing pony shirts and buttons and were all decked out, where I was wearing my vendor badge with a Nightmare Moon pin on the lanyard. Maybe I wasn't obvious enough of a pony fan, I don't know, but I leaned in, smiled big, and said quite sarcastically, 'Oh, you don't want to go in there, those guys are strange. They like a kids show about talking horses.' You know, to break the ice, and to have some friendly fun poking fun at ourselves for being at a PonyCon. I've done this before, and it has never upset anyone in my last 10 years of going to comic book, pop culture, sci-fi, and anime conventions. The woman smiled back at me and said, 'Oh yes, very strange.' We chuckled a bit, and she walked away. I was about to turn to continue on my way to the bathroom when some other man came up on my right side, grabbed my trapezius muscle, and pressed his thumb to my jugular, and applied light pressure. Basically, the Vulcan nerve pinch. I'm blind in my right eye, so this already took me by surprise and set me on edge. I was led to believe by his actions that this kid knew what he was doing because he found my jugular quite easily and applied enough pressure to imply the threat of further violence. For added context to what I'm about to describe to you, I'm a trained and state-licensed security officer who is currently employed at the largest tourist attraction in Oregon. I'm not that big of a guy. I'm 5'8" and I have a lean but muscular build. He was probably about 5'10" or 5'11", just tall enough to look down at me, which he did. He squared himself up and said, "Did I just hear you call a brony strange?" I maintained my relaxed body posture and did not respond physically to his threat in an intent to show that I was not scared of him and that he did not threaten me. "Yeah," I said slowly and clearly with a tone that implied, "So what if I did?" He smirked and said, "I don't think that's funny." "Okay," I responded, again making it clear by my tone that I was not threatened by him. "I don't like that. I don't think it's funny at all." And as he said those words, he slid his hand up my neck, wrapped his fingers around my throat, and squeezed. This is when I took physical action. I grabbed his wrist tightly with my right hand, pulled it off my throat and away from my body to the left to throw him off balance. I pushed away with my left hand and stepped back with my left leg as I let go to blade my body away from him and make myself a smaller target. I pointed with my right hand and yelled, "No, you do not joke about that." Immediately, I turned and left for the bathroom. I was amped up on adrenaline and ready to destroy this guy, but I didn't need to, nor did I want to. All I wanted to do was to get out of the situation and end it before it started to get worse. I didn't go to Everfree to get into a fight. I went to hang out with friends, make friends, talk about ponies, and promote my event. After I got back from the most stressful and shaky piss I've ever taken, my girlfriend asked me what happened. I explained it to her, and she said that she had told a different story to his friends as he walked away. Concerned that this would reach ConOps and put a bad mark on the relationship between our two events, I decided I would tell them about what happened before they heard something that was not true. I had, and still do not have, any reason to lie about what happened. Usually, I would much rather let bygones be bygones than start shit, but this was a serious threat to my well-being, be it a misguided joke or not. The staff were absolutely aboard by what happened, but didn't know what to do. I was bounced around to many staff members until I was finally put in touch with the head of staff. I introduced myself and my organisation to him and explained what had happened. I gave as good of a description as I could to him and went on with my evening. About an hour later, the kid came back to the side of the con that we were in. I went to ConOps and pointed him out. They grabbed a security guard and they confronted him. The security guard was very unprofessional and seemed annoyed that he had to help at all. He was also horribly misinformed and presumably undertrained, as he insisted that in order to remove the guy from the event, we would have to call the police. All you need to do is confiscate his badge, inform registration, and inform him that if he returns, he risks facing charges of criminal trespass. But that is neither here nor there. The two of them went to confront the kid, and I went back to my table to draw with my friends. A few minutes later, the head of staff returned and informed me that the guy who choked me would like to apologise. I told him I would accept and followed him to the room where the guy was. The young man put his hand out for me to shake, introduced himself, and said that he was sorry. I did not immediately shake his hand, nor did I immediately accept his apology. I told him how his actions made me feel threatened and were not appropriate for any situation, as a joke or otherwise. The staff security guy interrupted and said, "Yeah, he knows. He's been informed." I looked at him and continued my conversation with the kid. The security guy talked over me again. I turned to him and said, "Thank you. I appreciate your help and everything you've done for me tonight, but I'm talking to him, not you, and I'm accepting his apology, so I would appreciate it if you would let me speak." He shut up and looked down, scoffing to himself. At this time, I reiterated my point to the guy who choked me once more and offered my hand for him to shake. I introduced myself and accepted his apology, making sure that he understood the gravity of his actions and the criminal charges could have easily been pressed. And that's my story of the time a brony choked me, a fellow fan of My Little Pony Friendship is Magic, because he overheard a stupid joke. But if you want to hear a few of my stupid jokes, why not check out my video on catastrophic fan conventions? It's definitely an underrated video of mine. I think if you like this kind of stuff, you'll really like that one too. Speaking of which, if you enjoyed this video, I kindly ask that you like and subscribe to show your support. I know I've only scratched the surface here, so if this video gets enough traction, I'll do a part 2. Aside from that, I want to thank you for watching, and I'll see you later.